Let's start with Georgia's running back room. I know it's spring. I know it's early. But with Kendall Milton getting banged up again, he's getting banged up metaphorically on our message board. People can't depend on him. But Jake Rowe, you're here to tell us that narrative is overblown.
It's a little bit overblown. Now, I will say this. I mean, and listen, there aren't a whole lot of people I'm worried about taking off in this world. Kendall Milton's dad's one of them. I don't want to cross paths with that
that's
dude.
A factor for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to cross paths with that dude. He would strangle me out. He'd choke me right out. What I know of him, he wouldn't do that. He's a good guy. But Kendall, I will say this. Based on his injury history, you got two MCLs, 2 soft tissue injuries. You could say 3 for the one that limited him last year in preseason camp, but then he comes out and scores 2 touchdowns in the opener. He's been injured every year he's been at Georgia. He missed 3 games his freshman year. He missed 6 games his sophomore year. Missed a couple last year, 2 or 3. With that said, it's kind of hard to say, all right, well, you're going to go into the season and you're going to rely on him as your lead back. I don't think Georgia's going to do that anyway. They haven't in the past. So, but I do think, I mean, you look at his career, I think 40 career games since he's been at Georgia, 10, 15, and 15. He's played in 29 of those. So if you're out there saying he's injured more often than not, that's hyperbole. If you're saying, well, he's always injured, he's not. He's played in most. He's been available probably for 3 or 4 of those games he didn't play in, but Georgia just didn't have to rush him back. So I see where those are coming from. I see where people are coming from, and they're saying, hey, you can't rely on this guy. It's not any fault of his own. He's just been dinged up, and now hopefully he gets this out of the way and he's ready to go for the season. But at the same time, he's been available for most of them, the vast majority of them. And when he's healthy, he's good. And I'm hoping for his sake, for his future and for his psyche and everything like that he's able to stay healthy through the season. And, we reported when this injury first came down that it wasn't that serious. And then we said we heard it was a little bit more serious. Not really. It's just one of those things that's like, all right, well, if you pull a hamstring, there's 3 weeks left in spring drills. He's out for the rest of spring drills. All right, that's it. He should be better, ready to go June at the very latest. And then he'll go through preseason camp, and we'll see if he can stay healthy for the entire season.
Knowing what we know today and what you just said, who do you expect to be Georgia's leading running back? And I know that question comes with a caveat because Georgia likes to run by committee. But Kenny McIntosh was, by and large, the lead dog last year. Do you still expect Kendall Milton to be that guy by season's end? And I'm not saying that you're judging him or banging up on him for his injury history or anything like that, but what does your gut tell you? Do you think it'll be similar to last year? Do you think this will look like more of a committee next season between Kendall Milton, Mustard, Branson, and Paul and Roderick Robinson? That's a lot of guys, man. I mean, that's an embarrassment of riches right there.
You had lost me there when you said Mustard, but I picked up on it eventually. I was like, what is he saying? I'm talking about Dejon Edwards.
Yeah, not Tennessee fans.
I still think it'll be Kendall Milton. I'm just going to stick with Kendall Milton on that one. I think he'll work hard this offseason, get his body in the best shape as it can possibly be, and I think he'll be fine. But we'll see. I mean, it would be a deviation from the norm for him at this point. And I never blame it on a kid whenever he can't stay healthy. Listen, I know for a fact there have been kids at Georgia in the past who have kind of cashed out, even when, healthy enough to play, they didn't. A.D. Mitchell's not one of those. But there was a wide receiver before him that was, and he was available sometimes and didn't decide to play when he could have. So I don't think Kendall's one of those guys. If you can't stay healthy, that's not your problem. I was an oft injured dude myself. I had surgery on both shoulders, both knees. It happens. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. But I think Kendall will put himself in the best position possible to do it. And if he doesn't, let's just take him out of the equation. It's hard to bet against Dejon Edwards because he is so durable and he is so effective.
He still gets overlooked, though, man. I don't know if it's because he's the diminutive one in the backfield or what it is, but the perception for me anyway is that people still don't look at that guy as the leading answer.
Well, he had a 20-yard carry last year, I think every 15 or so totes. Okay. That's pretty solid. That's pretty good. But he didn't have a single carry over, I think, 27 yards on the year. So he's not a big play back, and he's not super flashy. He's just a grinder. And I think Branson Robinson is a guy you're looking at. You're hearing a lot of buzz about him, especially of late. There were some, spoke to some coaches who were at the clinic who really impressed with him physically, and hard not to be. So I think Branson Robinson, Roderick Robinson are going to have a say in it. Interested to see where Andrew Paul comes in. Odds are there's going to be a couple of guys that get dinged up at running back. It's just too physical not to. So I do think Edwards has shown how durable he can be. He got 140 carries last year, I believe, and didn't really battle anything publicly injury wise, even though Kirby Smart did say at times he was dinged up.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, you say you think it's still going to be Kendall Milton. I think it's still going to be Daijun Edwards. I mean, personally, I didn't see Kendall, as the number one back. I think it is a 1A and 1B type deal anytime with this Georgia backfield, but especially when you've got two guys like Daijun Edwards and Kendall Milton. Daijun got more carries per game than Kendall did. That I think that he's kind of earned that. And again, he may not be the most flashy. He may not be the guy that everyone looks to and just thinks, number one back. And I think a lot of that probably goes back to recruiting. I mean, Kendall Milton was a
great point
coming out of high school. A kid that Georgia pulled from all the way across the country, got to come to the Southeast from the West Coast. Daijun Edwards is from their backyard, and it was somebody that was a little bit of a it was a backup plan to other options in that class, to Zach Evans, to Tank Bigsby. I mean, guys like that were that 1A option. Daijun was a little bit of a deeper pull by Dell McGee, and it's turned out to be a great one so far. Like you said, Jake, I think he's proven to be reliable. That he's proven that he can take the hits and stay healthy. I think every time a running back, every time you say that, you're holding your breath, hoping that it stays true. But I think Daijun Edwards probably was going to be Georgia's leading rusher before the Kendall Milton injury. And I don't think the Kendall Milton injury changes anything for Kendall. I think he was probably going to be the number 2 running back in terms of carries and yards. What interests me about Kendall is how does his ability out of the backfield affect this? Because Daijun has, at least, I don't think Daijun is as good of a pass catcher. And so does that get Kendall on the field more? Does he play more snaps because of that? But in terms of a pure running back, I think Daijun Edwards was the better option and continues to be the better option.
Both of these guys had some injuries, issues here and there with turning the ball over last season. I think that's something that both of them need to shore up. No doubt about it.
I think all 4 of the backs that really carried the ball for Georgia last year had a fumble, at least one. And that was something I was thinking about earlier today when you were talking about.
Branson's?
He against Tennessee, I believe, in the rain.
Daijun had one against Tennessee.
Daijun had one early in that game. You might be right.
Yeah, Branson had one. He turned it over after Georgia had forced their turnover.
Yeah,
in that game, he coughed it up, and then Kenny McIntosh's was against
Florida, because Kirby talked about how he came out pissed off after that.
Right, and Milton's was
Missouri.
It was against Missouri, and that was a big one.
Milton's was probably the most noticeable. Maybe it mattered the most, and I don't know if anyone of them truly mattered a ton since Georgia went undefeated, but the Dogs defense held Tennessee after Daijun fumbled, but once Kendall fumbled,
field goal.
Yeah. Once Kendall fumbled at Mizzou, I mean, that pucker factor got a little bit intense.
Well, at the time, so if you take yourself back to the moment, Daijun Edwards felt the worst because that was a 0-0 game.
Yes.
Georgia's driving coughs it up. Didn't end up being that big of a deal. Obviously, Milton's was there. I mean, McIntosh's fumble allowed Florida to kind of try to climb back in that game a little bit and make it closer than it was previously, obviously. And then, Branson Robinson's was, Georgia had just gotten – that one was kind of on the house. And honestly, what you got a true freshman carrying the football for in the pouring rain, massive game. I don't know. I didn't really know what was going on there. And I was kind of a enigma how they used him last year anyway.
Yeah. Speaking of enigmas, Matthew C. says Brock Bowers will be lined up at fullback 69% of the time in Bobo's offense. That's a very specific percentage estimation from Matthew C. Very nice. Let's talk about Branson Robinson, though. At times, I was just waiting for that guy. I almost felt like it wasn't fair to him because there have been so many just historically great freshman running backs at Georgia that just came out of the gate. And for whatever reason, I don't know if Branson didn't have the opportunity to really get his feet under him or really get going. You didn't see that from him last year, and that's not an indictment on him. There were a lot of other good backs and a lot of good players on offense, period, that you had to compete against if you're Branson Robinson. What's it going to take for him to separate himself? And it sounds like from what y'all have seen and heard from practice that he is taking the opportunity to do that this spring.
Well, we saw that flash against Auburn. He had over, I think, 91 yards rushing in that game.
I think it was 98.
98. It may have been, you're right. It may have been a little higher than that. But he looked really good against Auburn. And, what was weird about that game is, the announcers said that he had earned an opportunity to play, that Kirby had told them that. We know that Kenny McIntosh was dinged up. He was dealing with a thigh bruise. And Kendall Milton got hurt early in that game, had a groin injury. And I don't know, Branson looked really good in that game, but then you didn't see really much of him until the national championship game when against a defeated TCU defense. He looked incredible. So, I think he's a really talented back. I think confidence is a big thing with a running back. I think running backs are almost like 3-point shooters there. I mean, if you make it to a place like Georgia, you're probably hard to tackle. You're probably really physical. You're probably really fast, and you're capable of big things. It's just a matter of, can you get confident? Can you become the kind of back that trusts your instincts? And I think that's something that he maybe battled a little bit last year because it was so different than coming from the high school level where he probably had a lot of Branson right, Branson left type stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think he's definitely got all the tools, and there's some stiffness there. He's not a perfect specimen of a running back.
He's a giant muscle, dude. It's hard to be flexible. He's gonna do some of that Brock Bowers yoga.
Yeah, Nick Chubb had some stiffness. And I'm not trying to compare him there, but then that's what everybody likes to say because he's a workout warrior. But I think both the Robinsons. I think Roderick Robinson is going to be a guy. Started to hear a little bit of chatter about him.
Dude, I didn't realize how big he was.
His balance. You just don't see backs that big and that smooth. And I'm really, really fascinated by that combination there and how good he can be.
Yeah.
Georgia's got a big running back room. Andrew Paul, 218. I'm just scrolling through the weights here. 220 for Kendall Milton. Roderick is listed at 235. Branson at 220. And then Dejan at 201, and he's 5'10".
You said Roderick was 235?
Yeah, Roderick 235.
Yeah, man, I did not realize he was that big. I didn't realize he was built like that. That's a lot of dog. And we're not overlooking Andrew Paul. I believe we brought him up on Sunday's show. Maybe it was this past Wednesdays. Can't remember. I wasn't on last Wednesdays. We're not overlooking him. He's just dealing with his own injuries too. But once he gets back, he's kind of like a Kendall Milton clone to a certain extent. This really could be the biggest running back room that Georgia's had top to bottom in a while.
Well, and because of that, I'm very curious to see, and I think that Kendall's injury this spring could help with this. How do these guys develop as pass catchers? Because that's one thing that they are losing in Kenny McIntosh is a very reliable pass catching back. They used him in that role, obviously this past season, but even when they had Zamir and James Cook there as well, they used Kenny McIntosh as that go-to guy out of the backfield. Who's going to be that guy? Who's going to step up as a pass catching option? Because that's an important part of a Mike Bobo offense.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how it works. We know that Mike Bobo loves his running backs. He loves to run the damn ball, and fans like to tell him to run the damn ball.